everybody, Cinema Sickness here with this week's Weekly Watch, where we take a look at all the titles I've watched throughout the week, and I briefly discuss them. And this here is the first Weekly Watch of 2014, so we're going to take a look at the first movies I watched of this new year, watched some great movies, started the year out fantastic, so let's take a look at what I checked out. So the first title I checked out was Argo. Now this is one I definitely wanted to see because I'd heard such great things about this movie on a lot of people's best lists. I think it won a bunch of awards. This movie was just talked about and praised so highly, I had to see it immediately. Thus why it was the first movie I watched right out of the bat, right out of the Merry Movie Marathon. I knew this would be the first non-Christmas title I checked out. And it was just as good as I had heard. It was a fantastic story about these people trying to escape this country. And it was super suspenseful, very well written, very well directed by actually Ben Affleck, or as it says here, from the director of The Town. Why doesn't it just say from director Ben Affleck? That's weird. Anyway, but a great telling of a story. Again, very suspenseful, very thrilling, a lot of fun to watch about this crazy true story. It's fantastic. One of the things I love best about this movie, though, is the very beginning of it. I thought it was really cool, and I guess maybe, well, it wasn't written by Ben Affleck. The screenplay was written by Chris Terrio, T-E-R-R-I-O. I don't know. So whoever's idea it was to start the movie out by basically saying our government is fucked up. That's how this whole story starts out. It basically says that, you know, everything was going peaceful in this country. Everything was wonderful and things were going well. People were prospering. Money was being made. Blah blah. And then our government went, we want some oil, and basically just overthrew their ruler, overthrew a democratic ruler. Said, oh no, you know, even though we're always supposed to be fighting for democracy, just went, no, we don't like your democracy. Put our own leader in charge, and he ended up becoming this like tyrant and destroying this country. And then eventually somebody else took over and overthrew him, and that's our new bad guy, our new enemy. And it basically just says, like, had our government not been a bunch of greedy assholes, or I shouldn't say government, I mean, we're not a democracy, I mean, ask anybody who says government, they'll tell you, we're a capitalist country. And, so I'm not trying to get all political on you here, so I don't want to say government, I would say the big businesses in charge who actually run the country, run the government, if they had, if they're not so damn greedy and wanted, all the natural resources, everything would have been okay. We wouldn't have had this big ordeal. These people never would have been stuck in this town. So I like how the movie basically starts out by saying this whole story is the fault of the United States government. It's all their fault. The reason why these United States citizens are trapped in this country and need to be rescued is because of our own government. I thought that was really cool and kind of ballsy. You don't see that too much. Usually these stories are kind of twisted to make it look like United States is awesome when really there's a lot of fucked up things this country does, and I love how they point that out. So I thought this was a great telling. Like I said, everybody says this movie is fantastic, and it is. I really have no flaws in this whatsoever. I thought it was very well done. Everybody was great in it, very well acted, just a fantastic, very suspenseful story, and one I'd recommend checking out. Then I watched a History Channel documentary with Ellis Island, and it's simply a documentary on Ellis Island, which was really cool because there was a lot of things about Ellis Island that I did not know. I knew kind of just the basic story of Ellis Island. There's a lot of history behind this facility. So much I didn't know, especially early history. I mean, there's a lot of early history before the Ellis Island. If you go to New York and you go to visit Ellis Island, the historical, I don't want to say monument, but the historical building that's there now, that's just a very early telling. There's a lot that happened before that. Different buildings that were used as, basically at Ellis Island, just all sorts of things that happened way before the facility that most people know as Ellis Island. I thought it was great. So just a fantastic documentary on Ellis Island. It's great. I would highly recommend checking this out if you want to know any history about Ellis Island. If you're interested in that, if you're like me, you're a history buff, you want to know all there is to know about history, this is one to check out. Very well done. And like I said, I learned a ton that I did not know before. And then because I was on an Ellis Island kick, I had to check out Forgotten Ellis Island. Now this, I just went into assuming it was going to just be another documentary about Ellis Island, only this time done by PBS. Not the case. This is simply about the hospital on Ellis Island. And that was really cool because whereas This documentary covers everything. They did cover the hospital in this. They did talk about the hospital, but they covered everything there is to cover about Ellis Island in this documentary. In this one here, they stuck mainly just on the hospital, and that was very interesting because they went very in-depth on the hospital. Tons of things that I did not learn in the first documentary, because again, the first documentary was telling us about everything and had to, go over everything pretty quickly. This just featured, again, just the hospital aspect of Ellis Island. And again, I learned a ton that I did not know. I didn't even realize there was a hospital on Ellis Island. I mean, it makes complete sense, but I didn't realize it was to the extent that it was. I just thought if they had a hospital, it'd just be, somebody falls on the stairs or stubs their toe, then you might need to go to a hospital. No, the whole hospital where they were quarantining people, and if anybody came over here with diseases, they would actually try to either cure you or help you out or something like that. It was really interesting. So another great watch. Definitely complemented the other Ellis Island documentary I checked out. So another great one I'd recommend seeing. Next, I checked out Hitchcock, and this was one I really wanted to see, as I am a big fan of Hitchcock movies, and I really do like Psycho, and this movie pretty much takes place all around the making of Psycho, and this was just a really, really good and interesting watch. Of course, my question is how much of this is, real, how much has been fabricated. It seemed, it was very interesting. It seemed very, questionable at times. There were some things where I was like, I really wonder if that actually happened, or if it did it happen to this extent? I have a feeling that some things might have been over-exaggerated for cinematic purposes. I'm just guessing. I don't know the full story. I certainly wasn't there. I haven't read any books. I don't know everything about the making of, what went into making a Psycho. So I do not know about everything. But I have a feeling some things were embellished a little bit to make the story seem more interesting. That's my only guess, but regardless, it was a fantastic watch. I would highly recommend checking this out. You learn a little bit about Hitchcock himself. They definitely tell you things about Hitchcock that I certainly didn't know. You definitely learn about him, learn about his family, learn about people who were around him, and also the making of the making of Psycho. Not the making of this movie, the making of Psycho. So a great watch. I would definitely recommend checking it out if you're a fan of Hitchcock, if you really like Psycho. It is something to see. Like I said, I have a feeling much of this might have been embellished. It really seemed like it. I have a hard time believing that the story was that crazy at times. I would like to think that some of this might have been embellished. I don't know for a fact. It could have, all the craziness that happens in this movie could have been 100% real. I don't know. I really don't know. But anyway, a great watch. Anthony Hopkins was fantastic in this too. I mean, look at him there. He does a pretty damn good job looking like Alfred Hitchcock. I thought he was great. His voice was a little off. It took a little while to get used to. In fact, when he first started, it really sounded like Anthony Hopkins trying to do an Alfred Hitchcock voice. It almost sounded like he was kind of like forcing it a little bit, I thought anyway. But as we went on, you forgot that that it was somebody trying to impersonate basically Alfred Hitchcock's voice, and you just sort of accepted it. Whereas, like I said, in the very beginning, it was a little hard to get past. But 15 minutes in the movie, I wasn't even thinking about it anymore. So great watch. I would definitely recommend it. Again, if you like Psycho, if you like Hitchcock, it's something to see. Next, I watched Father of Invention. Now, this was a movie I picked up as a complete blind buy. Found this for $5 at Target a few months back. Just thought it looked interesting. It had an interesting synopsis. It had an interesting cast. I love Kevin Spacey, so I thought I would check this movie out. So I finally watched it, and it was actually a pretty good watch. I wouldn't say this movie's anything special or amazing, but it was a decent watch, especially for $5. You can find it for that price. It's certainly worth picking up. Kevin Spacey plays this character who is this big, he's one of those like telemarketer type people where he basically invents things. Although he doesn't really invent things, he says that like throughout the entire movie that he's not really an inventor. He just kind of takes two products that already exist and just smushes them together. And that's what he basically does. And he fully admits that's what he does. Anyway, so he makes these products. He's made this like billion-dollar company out of these products. But unfortunately, one of them, he pushed through production a little bit too quickly, and it actually endangers people. It actually cuts their fingers off. So he ends up going to prison for a while, and once he comes back out, what's he gonna do? He went from being this millionaire to being basically from being a nobody to being a millionaire, back to being a nobody. He doesn't know really how to deal with it. Things aren't really good. His wife, not with him anymore. She has a new husband. His daughter doesn't really like him anymore because he wasn't necessarily the best dad. He kind of started off as the best dad, but then didn't really become the best dad once he got all this money and whatnot. Of course, went to prison. So basically, the story ends up becoming about him sort of finding himself and sort of rekindling things with his family. sort of letting his wife go, realizing, well, she's with somebody else now. And, as long as she's happy, that's cool. It's not like I'm super in love with her anyway, so just let her go off and do her thing. And learning to love his daughter and realize that money's not everything. My daughter's more important. Family's more important. I could always just do some shitty little job. As long as I have my family, everything's going to be great. It's one of those stories, where family means everything, money means nothing. But actually, in the end, a little bit of spoiler here, but in the end, things do work out. I mean, yes, of course it worked out. Obviously, him and his daughter rekindle things. I don't think I'm spoiling that, but I do like the ending, how even, he doesn't have to give everything up. His daughter basically, it's very realistic, where his daughter says, hold on. You can do both. You can still be a millionaire. You can still sell these products you want to sell. You can still be the person you want to be, but it doesn't mean you have to, forget about me. It doesn't mean you have to treat me like shit. It doesn't mean you have to, just push me off to the side. No, you can still love me and treat me as your daughter and have fun with me and be a great dad and make money at the same time. There's no reason why you can't do both. And I like that, because that's very realistic. It's not like all the movies where, the person gives up like the $1 billion just for his family. Like, most people probably wouldn't do that. But in reality, you could do both. There's no reason why you couldn't do both. And in this movie, that's how it worked out in the end. So I recommend this movie. It was a decent watch. It's sort of, kind of one of those independent sort of films. Definitely has an independent feeling. But it was definitely a decent watch. And for the price, I'd recommend picking it up. Oh boy. And then I watched Silent Hill Revelation in 3D even. Oh, look at that. 3D. Is that even working on the camera? I don't know. Garbage. I'm just going to start this off by saying just garbage. Now, I was one of the few people out there who actually really enjoyed the first Silent Hill movie. I mean, that movie got just panned. People just trashed that movie. Most people I talked to hate the first Silent Hill movie. I actually enjoyed it. I didn't think it was anything amazing or overly special, but I thought it was definitely an enjoyable film. I like it. So I heard there was going to be a sequel. I was all aboard. I was like, cool. A sequel to the movie sounds good to me. I'm in. Where did this movie come from? It almost feels like they went, all right, the first Silent Hill movie made a little bit of money. It was somewhat successful, so we need to make a second movie. We're just going to throw something together really quick. I felt like this movie was just thrown together in like 5 minutes. Like, we need something. We only have a half hour. Quick, jot some stuff down, kind of relate it to the first movie. We want to bring some characters back. We want to make things kind of fit. Yeah, that's good enough. Put the movie out. That's kind of how I did this movie. It wasn't interesting. It just felt so badly done. And one of the worst parts about this film is the fact that everything was explained to you. That is a sign of a really, really, really bad movie, when the actual movie itself isn't telling you the story as a movie should. That's how movies should go. What's happening in a movie should explain to you what's going on in the film, not characters constantly having to stop and do dialogue explaining what's going on, or stop and talk to one another and explain what's going on, or somebody has like a flashback which has somebody talking in it explaining what's completely happening, what happened in the past, why are things happening now. That's what this whole movie was. It was just people talking, but not talking like a great way, maybe like a Quentin Tarantino movie does, but talking constantly in the sense that they were just explaining the story to you. They're like, here's what's happening right now, basically. And I was just like, that's a really bad way to do a movie. The story itself, what's happening in the movie, should be telling the story, not people. People in the movie should not be telling a story. That doesn't work. You can't. I mean, it was like they were reading out of a book, basically. So, complete garbage. I have to say, already the first week of the year, already a contender for one of the worst movies I've seen this year. This is already going on my list of one of the worst movies I've seen for the first time in 2014. Will it stay on the list? I don't know. I got a whole year to go, but as of right now, it's the first movie to make it on my worst list. This movie was just absolute garbage, and I can't recommend it. If you're like me, you saw the first film, you actually said, hey, that was a decent film, you liked it, fair warning, this film is nothing like the first one. First one, good watch. The sequel, absolute garbage. I would recommend staying away from it. The only reason I really picked this up, or the only reason why I'll be keeping this, is because I am a completist, and I gotta have a movie. I got the first one, I got the second one, but if you're not a completist, if you're just one of those people who are like, I've seen the first movie, I liked it, but if the second one's garbage, I have no interest in seeing it, then don't check this out. Then I checked out a movie whose name I actually had to read because it's very long. A Liar's Autobiography, the untrue story of Monty Python's Graham Chapman. This was a pretty cool watch. I didn't know what this was going into it. And what it ended up being was Graham Chapman actually wrote his autobiography, A Liar's Autobiography. He actually wrote a book. And what it is his life, but embellished. He basically tells the story of his life, everything that went from the very beginning up to, I guess, a few years before his death. But he embellishes on it. Like, he just makes up things that obviously never happened in a million years, but it does follow his life, which is really interesting because you're learning about him, but you're also having fun at the same time because he is telling you things that happened, but then something crazy and whimsical happened. You're like, all right, that didn't happen, but it still tells his life story nevertheless. It's very interesting. But what's really cool about this is the fact that Graham Chapman is actually reading this and doing a lot of the voices for characters as well. Because apparently, I think like a few years before his death, he actually narrated this book, and they have the recordings of it, and they used it for this. So he's telling the entire story, doing voices of John Cleese and everybody else in the Monty Python, Eric Idle and everybody else in the Monty Python cast. So doing other people's voices, which is pretty interesting. But at the same time, the Monty Python cast comes back and fills things in because there's certain voices he didn't do, or certain times two people might be having a conversation, or Graham Chapman's in a car with his parents, and his parents have to talk. So they have the Monty Python cast come in and fill in those voices. So it's really cool to hear Graham Chapman telling the story, doing voices for Monty Python characters, but then the Monty Python characters doing other people's voices. It's very interesting. Plus, this is all animated. But what's really cool is every time a certain story is being told, because this is just, it's constant stories. Like this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Every time something new happens, it's a different form of animation. And it's everything from CGI to hand-drawn stuff to just, I don't even know how to go into explaining it all. It's every single little scene is a different type of animation. It's all drawn by a different team in a different way. So every single scene has a different look to the animation. It's really, really cool. If you're an animation fan, this is one to check out. The animation is fantastic in it. So I'd say if you're an animation fan, if you're a fan of Monty Python, if you just want to learn sort of the not-so-truth about Graham Chapman, this is a cool watch. Again, I'd recommend this to anybody who's a fan of Graham Chapman, Monty Python, or animation. This is something you should see. And now comes the time for some of you to question me. The next title I checked out was Evil Dead, the remake. Now, some of you are probably asking yourself, didn't I just say this was one of the worst movies I've seen for the first time in 2013? Yes, I did. But I rewatched it. And I'm not going to talk about it now because I have a whole video I'm going to do just on me rewatching this. So I'm not going to talk about it now, but I'm going to tell you that I did watch it this week, and there will be an upcoming video just dedicated to the Evil Dead remake where I talk about me watching it for a second time. Plan on seeing that next week sometime, so it is coming. The next title I checked out was another one I just randomly picked up a few months back because it was a really good price, and that is The Six Wives of Henry Lefay. This is a pretty interesting movie, which I really just picked up because, like I said, it was really cheap, and it was Tim Allen. I really like Tim Allen movies, so I picked it up because I just thought it looked pretty interesting, and it was decent. The wife was actually kind of mad that I watched this without her because she saw that I watched this and thought it looked really interesting, and she actually wanted to see it, so my bad. But she asked me what genre this was. Was it a comedy? And I said yes, and then I started thinking, well, no, it was a dark comedy. Well, it was more of a dramedy. Well, I don't really know what this was. It was hard for me to pinpoint a genre for this movie. Was it a comedy? Was it a dark comedy? Was it a drama? Was it a dramedy? I didn't really know. It's sort of a mix of everything. I mean, I guess if I had to really pick something, I'd pick comedy, but it doesn't necessarily fit any specific mold, which made this movie pretty interesting. It's all about Tim Allen's character and just basically these people who he's brought into his life. Everybody from his ex-wives to his daughter, all kind of coming to have the terms with each other. They realize that they're all nuts in their own sort of way, and basically it's one of those stories where in the end they have to sort of realize that even though they're not necessarily related all to one another, they all have this common thread, Tim Allen, and they all sort of have to just realize that they might not get along, they might not like each other all that much, but it is what it is, the situation is what it is, and they all just kind of have to come together and realize that they are sort of this weird, almost kind of family. They just got to sort of put up with each other and work together when needed. I thought that was pretty cool. So I'm not going to go too much in this one. I don't want to spoil the ending. There's a bit of a sort of surprise twist ending, so I don't want to give too much away, but it is definitely worth checking out. Again, another sort of independent feeling movie, but very well done. Fantastic characters, very fun story, very interesting story, and just a good watch all around. Then I checked out Universal Studios Florida, Experience the Magic of Movies. This is pretty interesting. What this is, and this is weird because This one's actually from 1994. This was actually just given to me by one of my viewers. They sent it to me. But I do have another release of this from 1990. So, if I'm not mistaken, I think Universal Studios opened up either in 1990 or 1991, I think. Doesn't say on the back or anything. No. So, yeah, it opened in like 91 or 90 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So, I don't know if the other VHS release I have of this, since there's a date on the back, I don't know because of the date being like 4 years earlier. Is it different? I'm not sure. I don't know if they're the same or not. But what this basically is just to like an hour. This is actually almost closer to like an hour and a half. It's about like an hour and a half ad for Universal Studios Florida, which is really interesting because it's not just like maybe your typical Disney ad where it's maybe like a half hour long and they show you just some of the best stuff and what you can do and whatnot. This goes over everything. This shows you every show, every attraction, every single thing, every little detail about Universal Studios. This is right here. They really wanted you to come to this park. They wanted to say, here's everything that we have to offer. There's something you definitely like. They showed it everything. I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a bit, I mean, it's I'm not trying to think how to describe it. It's a bit like it's kind of like a double-edged sword where part of me is like, that's really cool that they did that. And I see kind of why they did that from a marketing standpoint, where again, they want to show you everything. So if everything you see in here doesn't really intrigue you, there's at least going to be something that makes you want to go, oh, I'd like to check that out. So I understand why they did that. But on the other side of the coin, it's like, well, this is really long. And I'd be willing to bet that a lot of people did not make it all the way through this. It is, like I said, an hour and a half long. It's such a long watch that, you know, for somebody like me, I'm really interested in these things. I love like vacation guides and stuff like that. They're so much fun. I have a bunch in my collection. I love watching them. But to the average person who just bought, you know, or well, probably didn't buy this. I don't know if this was given to you or sent out or what. But to the average person who got a hold of one of these and wanted to learn about, you know, Universal Studios, Orlando, Florida, probably went, okay, I get the gist, and like turned it off like halfway through it, if even that far through. So I have a feeling that a lot of people probably didn't make it all the way through this. But it was interesting. And like I said, they show you everything, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, I've only ever been to Universal Studios, Universal Studios I've only ever been to once. I went there once when I was a young kid. Back in 2000, I ended up going to Islands of Adventure, or Island Adventure, or Adventure Island, or whatever the hell their other park now is called. I did go there, but I didn't actually go back to Universal Studios. Obviously, nowadays I would, but back then I wasn't like the movie guy I am now, so I skipped over it. But I don't remember it being that cheesy. Like I said, I was a little kid, so maybe I was looking at it in different eyes, but I don't remember Universal being that cheesy. And what I mean by that is everything seems so hammy. Like they're constantly trying to, you know, everything's about movies, obviously. You know, all these Universal franchises and even some non-Universal franchises, they're really, you know, trying to bring the movies to life and bring the movies to you. And it just seems to be really cheesy half the time. Like the characters they have are hamming it up big time. The shows they have are really hammy. Even the attractions seem a bit hammy at times and a bit kind of like cheesy. I don't really remember it being like that. So maybe things have changed by now. I don't know, but seemed a little cheeseball when watching this. But that was just me. I don't know. I'm the Disney guy. I probably was looking at this, you know, glass half empty type of guy. I'm like, Disney does it so much better. Like, I don't know. But anyway, it was still an interesting watch. There's really not much more to say about it. It's just sort of a vacation guide. I'm sure they just gave these out and said, come to Universal Studios. It's new. You got to check it out. Here's everything. So an interesting watch. One of the things I liked best about this was, and if you have this, watch really quickly. I think it's in the very beginning of the film. They're showing on the streets the Ghostbusters. The Ghostbusters come. You know, the Ecto-1 goes down the street. The Ghostbusters come out and they're, you know, walking around and stuff. And of course, it's not the actual actors. It's people pretending to be the Ghostbusters. And when they go past the character, it's very, very, very quick. They go past the character who's playing Winston. They just pan past him. Look at who it is. It's actually Wayne Brady. They pan past him quick, and I thought, hold on, that looks like Wayne Brady. I paused it, got on my phone, and sure enough, looked up information. Yes, Wayne Brady, when he first started out, one of the things he did was worked for Universal Studios Orlando, Florida, as Winston from the Ghostbusters. Apparently he did other things too, like he sang in some of the musicals and played some other characters. But one of the characters he played was Winston. So when they pan past him really quick, keep your eyes open if you have this and look. It is actually Wayne Brady. I thought that was pretty interesting. It's Wayne Brady before he became a star just on this Vacation Guide. It was really interesting to see that. So it's nothing spectacular. I'm only going to recommend this one to people out there who are nerdy like me and love watching these vacation guides. If that's your thing, check it out. Then I watched a really cool documentary, Necessary Evil, Supervillains of DC Comics. This was really cool. This is an hour-and-a-half in-depth look at supervillains. They cover everything, all different types of supervillains, why people become supervillains, why are superheroes created to fight supervillains, or are supervillains created because of the superheroes, things like that. They talk about different characters, different types of supervillains, everything from these huge, massive characters to like more mediocre ones, to the way characters are developed and where they come from, their backgrounds. Really, really interesting. If you're a comic book nerd, if you just like comic book movies, if you're like me, I should say, I'm not a comic book guy. I don't read comic books, but I love comic book movies. I love all the animated like DC and Marvel shows and whatnot. I love them all. They're so much fun to watch. And this is definitely something I got a big kick out of. This was so cool to check out. It's just this really fun kind of in-depth discussion on supervillains and sort of where they come from and the history of supervillains. And I think that's really neat. Everything from the, when comics were first created and supervillains were first created in comics, to what they are now and how they're like so much bigger and badder than they used to be. And I think that's really interesting. And they basically talk about these supervillains like they're not, like when they first started out, basically the supervillain was just somebody for the bad or the good guy to fight. The good guy needed to fight somebody. They had a supervillain. That was it. The character there wasn't really much of a backstory. He just was who he was. He was just this bad guy who the supervillain had to go after. And how now it's to the point where the supervillain is just as important as the superhero. They have a background that's either just as in-depth or even more in-depth sometimes than the actual supervillain they're going up against. I think that's really cool how things have evolved like that. So a great watch. I would definitely recommend it. If you're into superheroes, supervillains, comic books, or you're just like me, you love comic book movies, this is something you need to see. And finally, the last title I checked out this week was Monsters University, which I wanted to see ever since this was in theaters, because I love Disney Pixar's, and I was a big fan of Monsters, Inc. Thought it was a great movie, still do, one of my favorite Disney Pixar movies. I love it. So this is definitely something I wanted to check out, especially when I started hearing pretty good reviews on this. A lot of people that I knew loved this movie, and again, I was really interested in seeing it. So I picked it up over Black Friday, but I was doing a Merry Movie Marathon at the time. I couldn't watch it. So of course, this is something I had to dive into right at the beginning of the year, and it was great. This was such a fantastic prequel. This is definitely, for you Disney Pixar fans, this is a Toy Story 2, not a Cars 2. We'll put it that way. If you're a Disney Pixar fan, you know exactly what I mean. This is a great, solid, I want to say like follow-up, but it's not. It's actually a prequel. So a great, solid prequel to Monsters, Inc. It's not as good as Monsters, Inc. I would say Monsters, Inc. is definitely top shelf. This is, the next shelf down. It's just Monsters, Inc. is just a little bit better. But Monsters University, again, is 100% solid. Definitely, if you ask me, holds right up there with Monsters, Inc. It's a great prequel. You learn all about Mike and Sully and how they become friends, or they're enemies at first, and they become these great friends, and how their friendship was built. And I love at the end where you see how they've gone from being, I don't want to give too much away, but you see where how they've come like full circle, where they've gone from the very beginnings of them being at this Monsters University to finally working at the Monsters, Inc. It's really, really, really cool. I just absolutely loved this film. I don't want to go into it too much. I don't want to spoil things. I don't want to tell you how they became friends and all the stuff, that craziness that happened. It's definitely something you need to see. Again, I'm a big Disney Pixar fan. I love all these films, and I would definitely recommend seeing this. If you are a Disney Pixar fan, or you just like Monsters, Inc., if you love Monsters, Inc., see this movie. It's a great, great prequel. And I had to see one of my favorite parts, though, at the very, very, very end. I love learning about learning about the Yeti. You guys remember from the first movie, the Yeti, he was banished. I love learning why he was banished. It's one of the funniest moments. It's just such a little throwaway line that most people, probably a lot of kids watching, won't even pick up on. But for us adults who remember the first movie, remember the Yeti character so great, the great John Ratzenberger character. You guys remember him? It's really, really cool to see, how he came to be, how he was banished. I loved it. Just a great, funny throwaway line. So definitely something I'd recommend checking out. Again, if you like Disney Pixar, if you like Monsters Inc., Monsters University is a must-see. So there you go, guys. It's everything I checked out this week. Definitely a great start to 2014. I watched a lot of stuff, a lot more than I normally do. I was watching like 2 movies every night. I think a lot of it also is because of the fact that I was doing my Merry Movie Marathon for like a month and a half, watching nothing but holiday-related titles from Thanksgiving to New Year's. You know, I was watching a bunch of Christmas titles, a lot of things I had already seen, and I had picked up all these movies over Black Friday that I really wanted to check out. And in that month and a half, I've just had this collection of movies. I'm dying to see these. So I wanted to get right into them. And because of that, I watched a little bit more than I have. So the next few weeks, I'll probably be watching like double time. Maybe like 2 movies like every night instead of like 1. I just diving right into them. So anyway, a great way to start off 2014. Watch a lot of good stuff. And I am so looking forward to the rest of the year. I know I'll be watching a lot more fantastic titles, and definitely looking forward to talking about them to you guys. So anyway, that's it. Like I always say, if you like this video, please give me a like. If you're not already subbed, please do. And if you're not already over at cinemasickness.com, head on over there, click on the shop tab, purchase yourself a Cinema Sickness sticker or a Cinema Sickness bun. I'd really appreciate it. So that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.